somebody download the files and put it on your file share so everybody else who doesn't have access to Skype directly, that they can go ahead and get the file, because the lab will be hard to follow if you don't have the documents. I'm giving it a couple minutes for you guys to download the files and make sure everybody have it. The PowerPoint files as well as the documents. The documents will be important to go ahead and do the lab, so it will be very hard to do the lab without it. Okay, well, I hope everybody had a chance to download the file or have a way to access the file. So today we're going to talk about the Azure SQL Server. I hope everybody had a good weekend, and I hope you guys are awake, alert, and enthusiastic, right? Monday morning is a little bit tougher to get it going, but hopefully you had a good weekend and you are all recharged, full energy, and ready to learn. So Azure SQL Database is very, very important, not just because of its Azure. Database is important in general, because without data, organization can't do anything. And we talked about this again and again about how important the data is, right? Because data is the core of every business. And of course, there are several type of SQLs out there. Of course, Microsoft have many versions. There's MySQL, Oracle has CPL SQL, IBM has their SQL. So there's all different types of SQL that you have. So I want to make sure that you understand that there are different types of SQL. And even in Azure, there is you can also create a SQL Server from Azure Portal under the VM. You can use SQL Server image. Okay, so if you use we create a VM. We've been creating a lot of VMs in the past with different labs. But in the VM, if we add an image to a SQL Server, that is different than this Azure SQL Server we're doing. So there's two different types of SQL within Azure. This is Azure SQL Server, we call that is a managed server, which means that Microsoft handles their backup, all that kind of stuff, backup and everything, version upgrades and all that. It is a managed server. We don't have to worry about anything. Now, if we put an image on a VM, it depends on what type of pricing you choose. The VM that you put on, you put the SQL Server on the VM, we don't consider that it's not a managed SQL Server. So there's two different types of SQL Server to begin with. So I want to make sure that we're going to talk. I'll show you both to make sure that we are. Okay, why am I having this? Okay, I have one slide incorrectly, so forget about the agenda. My apology for that, and update that one. So plan your Azure SQL database is very, very important. So before we put in data into the database, there's a couple things that we have to be very clear that, of course, that's at the design phase of any databases. So first, let's back up and talk about, and we talked a little bit about in the past, if you remember, I explained what is a relational database. Relational database, in order for any database, not just Microsoft, any database to be legally say that it is a SQL database. It is a relational database. It means that every table in the database must be connected to one or other or to itself. It needs to have connection. You cannot have a table sitting in a database that does not connect it to any other table or not connected to itself. If you have that, that is out of relational database. So that means that you went out of relational database, because that is what relational database means. So relational database, we have primary key, foreign key. That's how we communicate between the tables. That's a relational database. So this is very a different approach in Azure SQL Database, even though Azure SQL Database engine itself is a relational database, but the functionality, the features of the SQL database are separate objects, because we talked about that Azure is an object-oriented methodology. It was built object-oriented application. What that means is that every object can stand by itself. It is single and need to be able to stand by itself, not relate to any other. The only way that you can grant any type of permissions and thing is based on inheritance. So in a relational database, things are related through primary foreign key. In object database, everything is related only via inheritance. So you have parents and child relationship. We don't have that in a relational database. So that, I just want to say, once you go through, you're going to see the difference that from a regular SQL database. If you were familiar with Microsoft SQL database, all these versions we had, SQL 2003, 2005, we had 2008, 2012, 2014, 2016, 2019 version. So all of those are considered a regular database. So some functionalities that you have in those databases, you're not going to see that in Azure SQL database. Things that you see within Azure SQL database, you're not going to see that in the other databases as well. So in the other databases we consider desktop database, which is on-premises database, on-premises servers. Azure SQL database is an online database. So sometime when you try to run some queries that you're familiar with, you say, well, how come I can't run that against Azure SQL database, but I'm able to run it on my on-premises server? That's the reason, because the functionalities are not the same. The engine itself is the same, but the add-on functionality around Azure SQL and on-premises SQL is a little different. There are some functionality will not work in on-premises databases, and some of the functionality that it works on on-premises may not work on Azure. So I want you guys to keep that in mind, that Azure SQL database itself, the way that we built it within Azure, is a separate object. Azure SQL database by itself is an object. So why we choose Azure SQL database? As you know, when we create database, what do we want to create it for? We create it because we wanted to be able, have to create, read, update, and delete. Is CRUD, as well as stored procedures can run all that against that. You have two choices for your database. You have host server on premises. That means that your IT runs that in a data center to support that. Host Azure SQL database in cloud is based on SQL Server and provide a relational database functionality you need, even though it is an object database. Even though it is not object database, but it's an object in Azure portal. So the good thing with when you're using Azure SQL database is pretty much to spin off your original SQL database, right? So the good thing with that is that it's very easy to use to host all your applications and all that. The application cannot run without data, right? So the data is stored in a back-end Azure SQL database. It is a lot faster for your application to access data in the Azure SQL database instead of accessing to your on-premises SQL Server. So there's a lot of reason, of course, why we use Azure SQL database. Convenience. Setting up SQL on VM is a physical hardware requires. You do know about the hardware and software requirements, all that. If you want to create top of SQL, SQL Server, top of the VM, top of the VM for the SQL Server. But in Azure SQL database, Microsoft manage the hardware, software, updates, everything. So all you have to, you're only going to get charged for when your SQL database is running in minutes, and if you have no users accessing the database, the cost is very cheap, only if you have a lot of users are running. You can bring up tear down database instance at your convenience. You can come up fast and easy. It's easier to replicate the Azure SQL database, all kinds of stuff. You can do that. So before you go in and decide the Azure SQL database is right for you or not, you need to decide how you're going to use that database. Depends on the usage. It might be sometimes cheaper to have a virtual machine and put SQL Server on it. So if you have a lot of transactions coming. But if you say, well, I have a pretty much a lot of static data. My transactions I'm not getting 10,000 transactions a minute, not like these big stores like Amazon and Walmart and all these places. So if not like that, it might be better to save it that way. But if you have a lot of interaction going, maybe Azure SQL database is better for you. So because we manage things for you, there are no system for you to buy, provide power, or otherwise maintenance. So Azure SQL database have several pricing options. So it's a very cool thing also to say, hey, you don't have to put any upfront cost for a server to put SQL on it. So think of it from that perspective. It's a lot cheaper because in a VM you are buying, even though it's not a physical, you don't have it. You have to buy a VM hardware. I mean, so you're not buying, but you pay for the VM hardware. On top of that, you pay for whatever the database image is on that. But in Azure SQL database, so Azure SQL database saying that, hey, don't worry where we put the server. You don't need to know the underlayer, what the server is, what the core is, where actually that server resides on. You don't need to know that. Just tell me what version of the Azure SQL database you want and how you want it. So that's a very different approach. But like I said earlier, you have to go back and make sure on the cost is that it's not always cheaper to use Azure SQL database. It depends on how you're going to use it. Depends on the usage. You might be better doing it, putting Azure on the VM, or you can still use cloud, but it's not Azure SQL database. So you really also need to define, we talked about this, is prices versus performance. The higher pricing option you choose, the performance will be better. But you have to look at it, what is the return on investment? Is that worth it for you to do it? Okay, before it was running, it takes 10 minutes to run this particular script procedure. Now it run in 1 minute. Does it worth it for you to pay a higher cost for that? And so that type of thing. So you really need to balance it between the two, and also balance your application or your database budget to make sure you can choose the right version. Scale. You will store double every year when running on premises. How much access capacity should you plan for? So I don't know if you are done SQL database and you got DBA like me for a long time. I done a lot of database stuff, and back in old days, what we normally do is how to scale our server. Because remember, we don't have cloud yet, so what we do is that we have to scale our server to make sure that if we purchase a physical, that we go to Best Buy and purchase a server, or go to Dell and purchase a server, we need to make sure that that server is going to last us for about 5 years. So the rule of thumb, what we have done in the past, is that we'll look at that. We still do that for our premises here anyway. So what we do is that we look at what the growth in the last 3 years. We find the average growth in the last 3 years. So let's say average growth is that, I'm making this up for easy calculations, say the data grow 1 terabyte in the last 3 years. If we know that our database grow 1 terabyte, so in the last 3 years, that's our average. So you're going to take that average, you're going to multiply that with how many years. Then you're going to multiply that with how many years, and then you do 0.07%. That's for overhead. That is how big a hard drive you need, to store your data, to make sure that that server is going to last for 5 years. So that's what we did in the past. Here you don't have to. You just start with what you need. And any given day, even any given second or minute, you can go and increase the size of the data without bringing the database down. So that's the coolest thing. You want to make sure that you don't have to bring the database down. In the past, if we had to upgrade the database, we want to upgrade hardware, operating system, anything, we have to bring the database down. And here we don't have to. So scalability, that is a huge, huge thing in cloud. I'm sure you know by now that we've been talking about that. And a lot of times people are concerned about a security, but I guarantee that there's a lot of organizations are safer, secure on cloud than in anywhere else. And we talked in I think first a couple of sessions, we talked about this as well, that if you're concerned about security, you can have a private cloud. Private cloud means that you have your own dedicated server for you on Microsoft Data Center. So private cloud, you're not sharing with anybody. You're not sharing your network. You're going to have a straight connection from on-premises, your clients, to Azure site. You can do a straight connection. You have we'll talk about those later in the other session of VNet peering and all that. So that's how you can connect. But you have a private, dedicated server just for you. So you can do private cloud and public cloud. Even public cloud is not. Public cloud is still pretty secure because we are using advanced encryption system, and we talked about that AES, and but like anything else, right? SQL database comes with a firewall also. So not only that, you can have a firewall, at the server level. You can also have it at the database level. Also, say, hey, even you could get into the server where that SQL database is on. You may not be able to get into the database itself. So we have a database with a firewall that only set. And we also create these whitelist IP addresses you trust. You can put that, there's Visual Studio, SQL Management Studio, all that stuff, to include all your whitelist IP addresses you can trust. So that way they know this is the IP addresses that you're allowed to connect. So pretty much the IP address range for your organization, that will be put into to make sure that at this range, these are all internal employees. We allow them to connect to the network. So with Azure Database, we manage the hardware software update. When they say we, that is talking Microsoft, manage the hardware software updates, operating system patches, everything. So you really have to only concentrate on your database. And like I was saying, you can also have a control access to your database only, so which is also pretty cool, which is the database layer that we do not have, the security level we do not have in on-premises servers that we have on Azure. You need to make, when creating Azure SQL database, how a logical server acts as an administrative container for your database. So when we're creating this Azure SQL database, we are putting it on a server, but that server is a logical server. We put it on a server, but we don't need to tell that server needs to be what operating system. We don't even tell that. Microsoft's going to handle that. I only have my first cup of espresso. I need a second cup before I'm 100% awake. All right, here, the differences between purchasing models, and also we are going to create elastic pools to share processing power among databases. That's another cool thing. So think of elastic pool as like we have 4 or 5 databases, and the 4 or 5 databases, we set these resources, say, well, we have 4 CPU with 200 terabyte data hard drive, this much memory, 1 gig memory. I'm making this up. You have that, and combine 5 databases. But as you know, some databases may be busier than the other, and some of them are not. So when you're doing elastic pools, it's going to share those resources among those 5 databases. So if one database is not busy, you can use that resources to run another database so it will run faster. So it's not like, okay, we have 5 databases and 2 databases running like crazy, the other 3 sitting doing nothing. It's not like that. So that's what elastic pool, we will create elastic pool today, so we'll see. And we can also set up how correlation rules affect how data is compared and sorted. So standard correlation rules that you see that, right, Latin blah, blah, that's how you want to sort your data and how you want to affect the data to be compared. If you're doing a match or when you're looking for a search or doing a join in SQL. So we're going to talk about how to bring up Azure database from the portal. We're going to add firewall rules and something you need to consider when you create an Azure database. So also think of it as so let's talk a little bit about the server. So when we create a SQL database, we'll create a server. But we don't need to tell the server what operating system needs to be or anything, but we're going to put a server. The server is your container. So within the server, you can create many databases. But they all has to be Azure SQL database. You cannot create within the same server. You can have one Azure SQL database, one Oracle database. You don't want to do that. So think of the server as a logical layer, and on that logical layer server, which we don't have something, logical means it's something you cannot feel, touch, and see, right? So logical, on that logical, we are putting Azure SQL database on it. So and that's what we consider it is a administrative container. So on one server, one container, server considered container, you can have many databases. So but every database must reside in a server. You cannot have a database sitting out there without any server attached to it. This database will not survive without a server. So it has to attach a server. So it has one-to-many relationship. Each server can have many databases. So they normally, Microsoft already have when we created through the portal, they already have built-in firewall rules, but you can create your own firewall rules and override those. So we need to create one database, but in a logical server enables to enter more later and tune performance about all your databases. And people always ask me, how many databases can you have? You can have as many databases you want in one container. However, you have to decide that if you have too many databases, you might need to create separate containers. You might want to create separate containers. It might be price-wise maybe more efficient. That's something that, again, pricing versus performance, you need to look at it. So Azure SQL Database has two purchasing models, which is DTU and vCore, which is very different from other web app and all the other objects that we've been creating with the VMs and all that we've been creating in Azure Portal. DTU stands for Database Transaction Unit. A lot of people are not, DTU is a terminology that most DBA will know, but if you're not DBA, you're not going to know that. So it's a combined measure of compute, storage, and I/O resources. A simple pre-configured purchase option. So DTU say, okay, for this transaction to run, you're going to need this much memory, this much disk space, and this much I/O resources. So that is, combining all three of them and going to tell you what level of DTU you need. So DTU is something that DBAs will sit and calculate it to make sure that we know the right DTU. So before you create in a production environment, I highly recommend that you look at it to make sure that you understand what DTU is and make sure that you are choosing the right DTU price. It's not complicated, but also it's easy to look at it. When you set up a particular DTU, and if your database is running so slow, people complain the connection, then you can say, okay, let me go ahead and switch it, and you can switch it to a higher DTU. So I always tell users that to start with a lower DTU and try it, and if that doesn't work, go to the next one, because the price varies from one to one. Of course, the higher DTU you have, the more you're going to be paying. So DTU is one way you can buy. Another way we can also buy it based on vCores. A greater control over what compute and storage resources you create and pay for. So DTU provide more a fixed price. Hey, this is the fixed price. So if you pretty much say, well, most of all my transactions are the same. I don't really have a lot of different variation type of transactions, that you're better going with the DTU model. But if you say, well, we have a lot of vendors, and each vendor has their own way of doing it. Their transactions are going to be, very different from each one and all that. Then you might be better off doing vCore. So again, those are all the things that you have to test it, and I said this to you guys before, and I said again, you wanted to communicate with Azure team to make sure that Azure team from Microsoft side to make sure that you're choosing the right DTU, choosing the right vCore. Okay, you need to look at all of that before you actually run it in a production environment. So what is SQL Elastic Pool? I was just talking a little bit about it earlier. Is relate to the DTUs and say, hey, you buy a set of resources and say, hey, whoever need it is going to pull it. So it's not evenly distributed. It's going to allow you to share that between 4 or 5 databases. Normally, in Elastic Pool, it depends on the size of the organization. I see anything from two databases to 100 databases in one Elastic Pool. And you can have multiple SQL Elastic Pools also. You won't need a SQL Elastic Pool for your prototype, but you won't need a SQL Elastic Pool because you need only one SQL database. But later we're going to create more SQL databases, and we will turn on the SQL Elastic Pool, and you get to see between the two how they're going to share the data. Not to share the data, share the resources. And what is correlation? So correlation is what the correlation default is SQL-Latin1-general cp1.ci.es. So I'm sure you see this one before. We see, SQL Latin1 a lot, but most of the time we don't really pay attention to what that means. So Latin1_general refers to the family of Western European languages. SQL Latin1 means that. So we said choose Latin1 general. C1 means that the comparisons are case insensitive. Hello compares equal to hello. Either you do it at capital. We always want to make sure that case insensitive. We don't want to worry about the case. Better worry about the case. It may be a lot harder to find a match. So that's what C1 means. And AS means that companies are accent sensitive. So resume doesn't comply equal to resume. The comparisons are accent sensitive. So you don't have specific requirements around how data is sorted and compared. You choose the default correlation, which is SQL Latin1. But there are different types of correlations. So if your organization also run out of the United States, you might want to look at that to make sure that you're choosing the right one for that particular region. So we're going to set up a database, which includes creating your logical server. You'll choose a setting that supports your transportation logistic application. We are going to choose settings that are going to support the kind of app that we'll build in later. Over time, if you realize you need additional power to keep up with the demand, you go to adjust the performance option. Just switch between the DTUs and vCore performance models. So a lot of cool stuff you're going to do. Set the server firewall. Like I said, we have to have a firewall set. It's now up and running. Now you need to choose you want to set up a firewall or not. If you don't set up a firewall, it means that anybody have access to the Azure portal will have access to your database. So you can set up a firewall rules to make sure that only so-and-so, only these people or only these apps will have access to the firewall. So you need to have set up allow IP addresses in the server firewall. At CIUD operation, we just talk about that as a create, read, update, and delete. How can you access your database and connect it to your app is to you, but we'll go directly into the Azure portal SQL database and run some commands and play with it just to make sure that we're familiar with it. You can run SQL command within the Azure portal. So even though we create the SQL server in the Azure portal, you still have to connect to that, right? Because it is stored. It's stored somewhere. We just don't know exactly where it's stored, but we will have the link. So it's when we create that database, it will create the database resides inside the container, which is inside the server. And then, example, if we create a database called MyDB, if you have access to that, you're going to be mydb.sqlserver.windows.net, something like that. So that's the link that you have to use. That part of it. We'll look into connection strings to connect to that database. How to connect your database using the SQL command. We're going to initialize the database with basic tables and some sample data, and we'll play around with it. So, Azure Cloud Shell. You've been seeing Azure Cloud Shell. We've been using that. Is a browser-based shell. We've been using Azure Cloud Shell, right? Manage and develop Azure resources. Think of Cloud Shell as an interactive console that runs in the cloud. So sometimes you'll see people will say Cloud Shell, and time you'll see people say Azure Console, but Console and Cloud Shell is the same terminal, is the same thing. In the early stage of Azure, we used to call that Console, and now we call it Cloud Shell, because also now in the new versions, from the beginning when we came up with Azure Portal, we also embedded, as you guys see, PowerShell into the Cloud Shell. So that's why it's a shell. It's not a console. So Cloud Shell can run in Linux. It can run those Bash shells, as well as Windows PowerShell. Cloud Shell accessible from anywhere. Besides the portal, you can also access the Cloud Shell from shell.azure.com, and you have in the Azure mobile app or from Visual Studio Code. Terminal for you to use during the exercise. So we will, but of course we've been doing Cloud Shell from that, from the button that we see on the top command bar. So we're going to use a bunch of easy commands to run the required create your resource group, the name of your logical server. Configure command to specify the default value for the server, and we are also going to set up FQDF, which is fairly qualified domain name. So your server name should be server name.database.windows.net. But when we enter stuff, we only need to put the top one. But for anything that you put as a server name, it's going to get database.windows.net. It's going to get append to it anyway. That stuff is going to get append to your database name. So, of course, you need to understand about your database to connect to the command, create a table. We're going to create a table. We're going to go in and make sure that you can create, read, update, and delete, so you can play. And then, like I said, data means nothing to us unless we can analyze the data, and which means we can view the data, we can read the data, we can run analysis tools if doesn't worth anything. So we're going to make sure that we can connect to the database and then play within the database. We're going to create stuff, read stuff, update, and delete. So that's what all the things that we will do. So let's start to the first lab. I know a lot of people showed up, so we haven't done any labs, so that's good. But for all the new people who showed up, can you make sure you have the documentation? I uploaded documentation to Skype, and if you don't have Skype, I know someone from your organization must have uploaded to your file share that you guys normally get. But make sure that you have the document, because it'll be very hard for you to follow along without having the document, okay? Okay, so this is the document that we are going to be looking at. If I go away. Create a single database in Azure SQL database using the Azure portal. Say that I have one already open. Okay, then close this one. I already have one. Okay, create a single database in Azure SQL database using the Azure portal. Does everybody have that document ready? In hand.
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
All right. So let's start. Let's go into your Azure portal, which I believe I'm already in my portal. So get out of here. Go back to resource group. All right. So we're going to follow the document to the T. So first thing we're going to do, let's walk through the document first to make sure you have the right document and we know the steps, what we're going to do. So we're going to the create a resource. We've been doing this many times. In the create a resource, when you select create a resource under the Azure Marketplace, we are going to select the databases. We are going to see on the right under the feature column, we select the SQL database. So, of course, we have basic information that we're going to fill in that. We're going to do this together anyway, but I just want to make sure we go through. We are going to create a new resource group for this database. So what I recommend, the same thing we'll do, enter my database my sample database with your initial. To make sure we put that, we're going to create new, type MySQL Server with your initial, along with some numbers for uniqueness. We can do that. This is the important one. The admin user and the password. We need to, whatever user you created here, you need to make sure that that username password, we are going to use it later down the road. So make sure that you write down the username password. You put, this is a server admin to the server that we're going to put SQL database on. This doesn't mean you're admin to the entire Azure portal. So because of that, I think we should be okay to create it, because we're creating, we want to be administrator of the object that we're creating. So I hope you guys have the permission, and I think we should. So the server name, of course, like I said, put your initial underneath. Server admin login and password is very, very important. That's what we're going to need to use later to connect to the server. So make sure that you write down the username and password, please. Okay, so once you put those in, and this is the same window still, when you scroll down or when you click on the tab. So remember here, when we log into, the Create SQL Database form pops up, we have these different tabs. So we were in the Basic tab. You might need to go into the Additional Setting tab. But anyway, when you scroll down, you're going to put the database name. Now you're going to put the server. Now, and we're going to say, want to use SQL pool? No, we're going to add that later. Compute storage, and we can select configure database. So when we go into the configure database, which we haven't done this before, so that's why I wanted to make sure you guys see this. When we go into the configure database, which is compute storage, is a pricing, what we call it pricing. So for different forms, they name it, they call it differently. Don't ask me why, but that's what it is. So in that configure database, we were in the, originally the default is standard. We're not going to do the basic, standard, or premium. We're going to choose the vCore base pricing option. So when we choose vCore pricing option, that means that you are serverless. So you're not putting this particular server on any VM. So we call that serverless. And you will select the serverless. Again, we'll walk through this together. And click apply. Then we select the additional setting tab. So remember earlier, looking at it, there are 5 tabs there. So we were in the basic tab. After we finished it, we go into the additional setting tab. In the additional setting tab here, you will see in the data source. So this is important. In the data source, we are going to use existing data, select the sample, which is AdventureWorks LT, will be created as a sample database. Notice that we don't have option to choose a SQL 1. That's a default. Sometimes business rules prevent us to choose from. Do we want to enable Azure Data Security at this stage? We're going to say not now. Now leave the rest of the values and we create it. Now we have we create and deploy a SQL database, the resource group, the SQL database, SQL server, which the database resides in, the container, and the SQL database itself. So once we get that, now we go into, go into the database that we just created at that stage, and we're going to select the query editor. So this is where it's going to ask you username and password. You are going to select SQL Server Authentication, and you got to put the username and password that you typed in earlier. This is really quick to check. If you don't get in, that means that's username and password, something went wrong there. So please make sure we can get in. Make sure you copy and paste username and password. Then we're going to run a couple select statements to see we have access to that sample database that we selected at the time we create the server and the database. So that's what we're going to do. I don't think it's a lot of steps, but there are a couple critical ones that we cannot miss, okay? So stay with me on that. All right, I hope everybody is in the Azure portal, and we are ready to rock and roll. So the first thing we are going to do is select create a resource from the main menu bar, which we've been doing this for many times, so you guys are pro with this now, right? Under the Azure Marketplace, we are going to select the databases. Notice that we have SQL Managed Instance, SQL Database, SQL Data Warehouse. We are going to just select the SQL database. We have, for our SQL database itself, we have 4 sessions. So you guys have plenty of sessions for us. We have 3 this week and 1 next week that carry 4 sessions. So we'll get to do a lot in SQL. So, all right. Here, okay, so we are in this paid tab, subscription, whatever default is, don't change. Resource group, we're going to create a new resource group. And the SQL, so whatever name, you can name it. Just make sure you have the right name. Did they tell us to name what they want us to name? Okay, yeah, resource group is my resource group. Okay, I'll stay with that, my resource group. Make sure that you put your initial group -RGMM. We are good for the resource group. Okay, database name. Okay, database name is my sample database, and append your initial. Okay, select a server. We are going to create new for the server. We are going to create new, everybody. When we select on create new, please. Okay, and it's going to be my SQL Server with your initial again. Okay, this is what I was talking about, the server admin login and password. That's something you need to make sure you have. Write that down for your username and password. Of course, don't say admin may, but maybe admin your initial. And whatever password you're using, we need to make sure that you're going to use the same, you have to use the same one. Okay. Way password here. Okay. I'll just tell you because I need to write this down to make sure. Okay. Okay, let me make sure that. Okay. Okay. I have other passwords. I just wanted to make sure I change it to the ones I haven't used before. Okay. So once I get that, once in location, you can choose anything other than East US. Choose anything other than East US and select, click select here at the server. Okay, want to use Elastic Pool, we're going to say no. Under the compute and storage tab, storage field, we're going to select the configure database. I just keep going back to documents also, so make sure that we all stay the same. All right. So we are going into the configure database. So when we do the configure database, the configure window pop up on the furthest right, you should see vCore base purchasing option, and select that. As soon as you select that, you should see compute tier shows up. Do you want provision, general 4, general 5? We need to select the serverless. So by selecting serverless, you can see serverless got that little check mark next to it. We're going to select our, make sure they didn't make us to do anything else. So let me make sure we select vCore's purchasing options. We select the serverless. Okay, we did that. Okay. You can change, if you want to change the max data size, we can change it. I'm just going to leave it 32. It's fine for me. We don't need bigger than 32. Max core size. Okay, 32 gigabyte, that's fine. And we are going to select apply. So everybody able to select the serverless, right? Because if you don't have the serverless, later down the road, you're going to have a problem. We're going to have problem to do the lab. So everybody okay with that, right? Unless you say something, I assume you guys are okay. So I am going to select review and create. Okay. So nothing come back. I go back to basic. You should see. And we are going to review and create and select create. If we have no problem there, make sure you look at, just look, pull, just in case I need to know this, select create. Okay, so this is building the server as well as developing the database. So as you can see, we're doing a lot of stuff. That takes a few minutes. A few minutes, a couple of minutes, 1 or 2 minutes. I am going to go grab another cup of coffee, so I'll be right back. Wait till it's complete. Do not move, okay? All right, mine is back. Hope everybody got your stuff back too.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so we are going. Oh, you know what? We didn't do it right. We didn't select the. Did we select the sample data? Crap. I don't think we select the sample data. Good research. I don't think we did that. Did anybody remember we select the sample data or not? No, we did not. I don't remember setting up the sample data, did we? No. I am so sorry. See, that's what happened when I don't have my 3-cup of espresso. All right, I do apologize. Let's go back to the, let's click on the resource group and find your resource group. Well, this is a good, at least you learned something new too. So let's go and delete these. Delete what we just created, my apology, but let's delete it. So when you select in the resource group, I don't know if you can see my screen, where in the resource group, you have to select the items under your resource group. You should have 3 items in there, and you should see a delete button on the top menu bar. And when you click on delete, you should have a flyout shows another plate shows up. Delete resources, select yes, and click delete. We're going to recreate this. I do apologize. I didn't hit this. We didn't go to the sample data. Say Monday morning, I'm not awake yet. I should be awake by now, but all right. So once you get those 3 deleted, and if you can't delete it, not worry, we'll create a new resource group anyway. But I just wanted to show you how to create a resource group. So once you have all the items out, and you're still in the resource group window in the resource group that we created just a minute ago, select the delete resource group. And this time we have to type in the resource group name instead of yes, and select delete. All right, we are going to, now we just learned how to delete resource group items in resource group. Wait till that delete is gone. No worry, we have 4 sessions per sequel, so we got plenty of time. Earlier when we were talking about it, I said I need to look at the document when I'm doing this, so I won't forget. Okay, once you get the delete down, make sure that's all deleted. And if not deleted, it's not a problem because we'll just create a new one, right? So we're going to select create a resource again, and then we'll practice make perfect. So we're going to practice again. We go to select create a resource. Under the create a resource, we are going to select databases. Under databases, we go to select SQL database. Under the resource group, we're going to select create view, and we are creating a resource group name, my resource group with initial. Okay, database name, my sample database. Okay, what we're going to this, create a new server. That's where it's important. That's where this is where I mixed up last time. We go back in there. We have to go with the configure database. That's what we need to create. So the server name again is MySQL Server. Okay. And make sure the username again, admin May, password, make sure you don't have any special character in it, because later when we do it in the shell, it's a lot harder if you have special characters. All right, so we have a server name, MySQL server with your initial pending, server admin login, admin with your initial or your name, password. Make sure you have no special characters in the password, and location. You can choose anything other than East US. And we're going to click select. All right, now we need to go into the configure database, which is under compute storage. That's where I screwed up last time, so let's go into the configure database. This time we are going to choose vCore-based purchasing options. We did that. We select serverless and make sure that if you wanted to change this data max size, you can change the data max size. We'll leave the way it is, and we are going to select apply. We are in the basic form here. We need to go to additional settings. So select, you can go to additional setting, or you can select next at the bottom here, or additional setting tab or not. Now this is where I missed it. So use the existing data. In that use existing data, we are under the additional settings tab. In the first field is use existing data. We're going to select sample. So every Azure comes with AdventureWorks LT. Do you guys have it? That's what my concern is. I didn't check it on yours. Do you guys have the Azure AdventureWorks LT? Anybody confirm you have it? Parkish? Lucas, anybody? All you had to click is the sample. You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah, man, we are good.
Okay, you have it? Okay, you guys have it? Good, good. All right, so we are leaving everything, okay. Enable advanced data security. Do you see that one at the bottom there? Enable advanced data security, not now. We're not going to create advanced database security. I think that's what they tell us to. Okay, then we are going to select review and create again. And once everything looks okay, you select create. If you don't get any error, that means you got a create button, come back, then we're good. Now go ahead and open the notification tab so you guys can see that as well. All right. So if you're following along with me in the document, so this is a part that I missed, so we came back and did that this time. Rest of review and create, so we are creating. And we are, once come back, we are going to go query the database to make sure we have access to the database that we just installed. That's what we're going to try to make sure we can do that once the database come back. The deployment is still underway. Did anybody watch the American Idol last night? Did anybody know who won?
What, May?
Did anybody watch American Idol last night? I guess not. I just wanted to see who won. I just look it up online. You guys normally this quiet at work also? That'd be very interesting. Not my family. My family, everybody talks. It said, okay, so it took 1 minute and 36 seconds. It's not that bad. So once your deployment is complete, in the notification tab, it should say go to resource. You can click on that go to resource button. If you missed that somehow, you can go into the resource groups, pick the resource group that you just create and open in the resource group. You should see your database, SQL database name, and open it that way. So you can open it a couple different ways. Okay, and you can also go just into SQL database icon in the main Microsoft Azure menu. You can select a SQL database. It will show you the SQL database you just created. So now we are in the My Sample database, which is our SQL database we just created. We are in the overview blade. Okay. So a couple of things I want you guys to notice. So of course, the overview blade go from left to right, the left part on the top header, it's a resource group. It tells you the resource group name. The status is online. It tells you what location, your subscription ID. We don't have the tag, but it tells you all of that. But on the left side, that is your server name. So my SQL Server MM is my server name, but the entire server name, the fairly qualified domain name should be MySQL Server mm.database.windows.net. Okay, connection string. You can see show database connection strings there. You can see the pricing tier. Auto pause delay 6 hour, oldest restore period. We don't really have any older restore point yet. Now, so in the overview section, in the configuration section, middle section, you should see a query editor overview. That's the last item right before the settings that you should see query editor overview. Let's select that query data overview. Query editor overview. Everybody see that? So it will pop up and tell you what already it was in your authentication type should be SQL Server authentication. It will tell you your admin login name already there. All you have to do is type in the password. And click OK. You should be able to go in, and we should be in the query window. If you can't get in, this is the time to tell me. I hope everybody can go in and everybody able to see, everybody able to connect. I know some of you guys cannot communicate with me through that. You can always put it in the Skype chat if you don't have a speaker turned on. So everybody in the query window, everybody able to connect? Anybody? Everybody? Did anybody have a problem? No? Everybody okay?
Yes,
we are
ma'am.
okay.
Okay, everybody in? Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure because there's no point of going in if you guys are not in. All right, so in that we are going to go type. So if you have that Word document there for me that we've been looking at, you see that SQL statement. I already provide the statement right underneath there. If you wanted to copy that or if you want to type it in, that's up to you. So we can paste that in and run the query. Notice that you see the data out there. Of course, it's not our table. We don't really care. But at least what we want to show is that we had created a database. We attached the sample database, and we are able to access the database. So that's what we just did. Pretty cool?
Yes.
All right. Everybody thrilled that you can't wait to learn more? All right. So everybody able to access it. Now, you can just open up the table and you should see all the existing tables. So these are things that you can go in and play to see what views that these are. Comes with AdventureWorks is our sample data that Microsoft put in for every Azure account. And if you I gave you guys access to the link to create your own Azure portal, and if you want, you can go play in there. But this is where everything is. This is what you have stuff to. Okay, so all right. So we had create that. Let's go back to our PowerPoint slide. So if you wanted to put your attention back to my screen. So we're going to create a lot more stuff today. So create a SQL Elastic pool. Okay, so software as a service, and we talked about that in early days that Microsoft has platform as a service, software as a service, infrastructure as a service, right? So of course, SQL database is considered software as a service. So in this particular thing we're going to create is for a fitness company. So they're saying like, because software as a service provider, SQL databases, you can provision SQL database for each customer, in our case for each location. So not only that, within the, within the same organization, if the organization have many different physical locations, geographical locations, you can also create a elastic pool across all these different, under predictable workloads, especially when storing customer data, you may not have visibility as to how quickly each client can grow and all that. So having the elastic pool is going to save you money, and also it is good to make sure you have access to, more power if you needed it. I'm trying to whatever. So SS provides would either need to over-provision resources to ensure they have capacity for the peak demand, or at cost or under-provision. So this way you don't have to worry about under cost or you're allocating too much that you don't need, because day to day per day you can change it to say, oh, okay, we didn't utilize this much, even though we allocated this much CPU and this much memory and this much hard drive, but we didn't really need all of that. We are not using all of that. Then you can change it even the same day. You can scale up and down as needed. So that's what they're talking about. So normally you wanted to auto set, you can also auto set up that between, 10 to 2 o'clock. That's the most transaction time. So we're going to have the high peak. So you're going to make sure you have a high demand. But, after 6, you're going to scale down automatically, because hopefully there's not a lot of people accessing after 6, not accessing the database. So that's what you can kind of play with it to make sure. It'll take a while to make sure you get it down, because it depends on pretty much you want to run like a whole year, then you have a good idea that, okay, which month is running more, because if some reason, if it's if your business is a season type of business, examples like tax businesses, if accounting firms, they're going to have peak month, that's not peak day. Within a day they can have a specific time they're very busy, and sometimes they have nothing going on. They want to keep their database on, but they want to keep it with the minimum resources, so it's going to save them money. So all that kind of stuff. So that's a lot of things that we can do. SQL Elastic Pool is a resource allocation. So instead of allocating, okay, one server with, you have this much memory, this much CPU, this much hard drive, we're saying that no, we're going to put it into a pool. Now we have 20 CPU, we have this much memory, I'm making this up, this much, disk space, and depends on how many servers you assign to that pool, how many databases you assign to that pool. There is a SQL Elastic Pool manager, which is the background, is going to decide which machine get what type of resources. Okay, so that's what it is. But you can also, we're going to go into some of these. You can also say that, well, in my Elastic, I want to put it in Elastic Pool. I have 5 databases, but one database is critical. So in my Elastic Pool, if that critical database is requesting, you need to give them high priority. You want to give them the most resources. You can do that too. So there's a lot of different ways that you can set up. So pretty cool stuff. When to use an elastic pool? That's a good question. Are ideal when you have several databases that have low average utilization but have infrequent but high utilization spikes. So you can allocate enough capacity in the pool to manage the spikes of the group, but the total resource can be less than the sum of all the peak demand of that database. Since all the spikes are infrequent, a spike from one database will be unlikely to impact the capacity of the other database. So because in this particular demo they're going to talk about is that in a fitness company, it depends on the weather, right? Because Florida get hot earlier than other part of the country. So we'll start a fitness promotion that outdoor thing because it's hot already in Florida, but it's still too cold for people to go out in other side of the country. So that kind of thing, because they're running different locations, so we're assuming that we're going to have different response. So you can use that occasionally, depends on, which location is running the promotion, and you're going to give that location more resources. So it depends on the spike. So what we're talking, all of these come down to is that you need to know your data. And we talked about that last week also with Power BI. A good report writer is to know your data. The same thing with database. Anything you do with database, what's going to come in handy is how well you know your database, which means how well you know your business running. You need to know how your business is using the data and how, what type of analysis tools that you're using. So those are all kinds of things that you really need to get into to make sure understanding your data is a very, very important, very primary important in any type of business. So how many database to add to a pool? So general guidance is if the combined resources you would need for individual database to meet capacity spike is more than 1.5 times the capacity required for the elastic pool, then the pool will be cost effective. So in a minimum, if you're recommended to add at least 2 S3 databases or 15 S0 databases to a single pool for it to have potential cost saving. Depending on the pricing tier that you choose, you can add up to 100 or 500 databases to a single pool. Now you want to be careful that you're not overloading it either. So you have to make sure. So there's a fine line. It's really hard to say exactly how many databases you can put on a single pool. It all depends on what type of database it is, what type of data those databases are also. Like we talked about the other day as well, that if your database has a lot of text, it's a text-based database, you have very static data, then you can have 500 should be a bad idea. However, if you have data is a very computation data, you're doing a lot of calculations and stuff, then going up to about 500 may not be a good idea. So that's something that you're going to, again, play with it and see that what is your return on investment and how is that going to respond to you. Come down to return on investment, right? How much money we're spending, how much is that going to saving us in performance, saving our employee time, all that kind of stuff. SQL Elastic Pool, because it said SQL in front of it, it is hosted only in SQL Server. You can specify an existing server or create a new server when you create an Elastic Pool. Like many Azure resources, Elastic Pool can be created from Azure Portal or using the PowerShell or using Azure Command Shell, using Azure SQL, create command, or PowerShell. So you can use all these different type of commands. We can create Elastic Pool. So we create Elastic Pool, and then you go to add databases to that to the Elastic Pool, that databases you have created in the Azure portal. Create a new Elastic Pool resource, specify the server. We can do all that, but you need to add databases to the Elastic Pool. And the funny part is sometimes I go to client site and they'll tell me that, oh, we have Elastic data, we have Elastic database pool. They create it, but they do not attach any database. If you don't attach any database, Elastic Pool is a separate object. It's just sitting there by itself because it has no database attached to it, so it's not doing anything. So you have to be careful with that. So again, in Azure, if from all these sessions that you take with the at least one thing I want you guys to get out is that Azure is an object, it's an object-oriented methodology-based application, website, or whatever you could call. Azure is it's a website and application, or a website, whatever you're going to call. But they are standalone objects, which means we can create Elastic Pool by itself. We can create a SQL database by itself, right? But if we wanted them to do something, we have to associate them. If you don't associate them, they are sitting as a separate object. So we're going to add we're going to use a PowerShell to assign new databases to the pool, and we can create a new database, or you can add existing databases as well. You can mix the service tiers within the same pool. So pools are based on the databases, the pricing tier is based on the database, not on the pool itself. All right, we are going to go into the next lab. This one is done, so I'm going to close it so we don't need that anymore. No, not to create the SQL server. I want to make sure I have the right document here. Okay, so this is a different, that's not the one I'm looking at. Okay, do we have another? Okay, this is the one that we're going to do first. Okay, so we need to set up the firewalls and all that first. Okay, so this is the one we're going to do, which is, it should say SQL commands. You guys have that file? Let me make sure I have it. I put it in there. I don't share it. Okay, I don't know how to see it, but so do you guys have? Let me see if I can see my. Do you have it? Do you have the file name is SQL commands? Do you have it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. All right. I'm trying to figure out. Do you guys know how I can look at what is up there? Okay, I guess I got to go add attachment. Then it would no, it's not what it is. I want to see what's in there. Okay, manage content. I think that's what it is. That's where. Okay, so I do have SQL commands. All right. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to do the SQL commands. I just want to make sure I have the right documentation before starting, and you know me. All right, so let's look at it first like we did earlier before we go in and do this. So we're going to create Azure SQL database. We're going to create another one for this lab that we just did, but this one we're doing a little bit different. Okay, it did server names, server admin, login, password. Make sure we did like whatever we did last time. Pricing tier, we're going to choose basic. And create your Azure SQL database, and we'll get the notification of that we're going to go in set a server firewall, which we didn't do last time. We're going to set the firewall, and once we have the firewall set up, we're going to connect to the database and add sample data, and we're going to do it through PowerShell. Well, Azure CLI. I like it, PowerShell, not PowerShell, it's Azure CLI. We're going to do that, and we're going to go in and test that we have data in the database. So we want to show you can know how to do it both in Azure portal, how to query the data, as well as from Azure command line interface as well. All right, so that's what we are going to do. So we are pro with this. We got this down. So we are going back into create a resource. All right, go away. Go into databases, SQL database. Okay, this time they didn't really give us a lot of option. I would just use the same resource group. I wouldn't create a new one just so we don't have tons of them sitting out there. For database, this is the one we are going to do from command line. Again, you can name anything you name. Just remember your database name. Okay, now for the select a server. Oh, sorry. Database name, sorry. We are, okay, I need to make sure we're looking at the document again. I know I go off here. So, okay, no, we do need to name the database name that the way they want us to name, because the syntax later will have a problem. Okay, database name is logistics. I'm sure you guys are looking at it, right? Even though I wasn't paying attention, but I know you guys are good. So go back to the portal, make sure that's a database name. All right. So back to the document. So select source, resource group, use the existing one, which we already did. Black, SQL Elastic Pool, not now. So Elastic Pool, no. Okay. They didn't, let's see what they say about the, okay, server. This is server. They show the server first. The server, again, make sure that we have the right username and passwords and all that. Okay, so here for the server, we are going to create a new server. Main server. Make sure that we are, okay. Do you like my main server? Okay, should be okay. Main server, 1, 2, 3, 4. Admin again. You can use the same admin username password if you wanted, so you don't have to keep creating new ones, which I will do that. Again, password, don't put any special characters. All right, keep the location the same as your resource group. We did select. Okay, so we had create the server admin, password, location, keep the same way. And we had create, go into database name, pricing tier, make sure it's basic. So let's make sure pricing tier is basic. Mine is standard, okay. So go to compute storage and select basic. Remember the last one we created it through a vCore based purchasing option. This time we're selecting basic for the pricing tier. So pricing tier is that config, compute, and whatever. They changed that from pricing to that label. They changed the label. And we are selecting basic for the pricing tier and select apply. And let's make sure I didn't forget anything here. Select source. Okay, so we need to go into the additional settings tab. Select using existing data is none. So we want to meet a blank database. So mean we're not using any existing data. Advanced data security, not now. We leave the default there. Okay, so once we create a blank database, Scholastic pool, not now. Correlation is important. Okay. I think we're good. So everybody have everything in, right? The database name, make sure is logistics, so we don't have to change it later. All right, now I think we got everything. I am going to select, and everybody change their compute storage to basic, right? Everybody got that, and we are going to select review and create. And if you have a create blue button, let's go ahead and click. Now this is the second database we're creating. They tell us to pin to the dashboard, but I don't normally pin it because it's just temporarily. After this lab, I delete everything out of there for my next class. So, but you guys can pin if you like. Everybody doing so far so good, right? You guys are still awake, alert, and enthusiastic, and or you just can't wait the class to be over. I can understand that. If you already work all day, it's hard. I know when I went for my master's, I was working full time, and I have children. Children were young at the time too, so it was hard. I was having like 3-4 hours sleep a night. I'm glad I did.
Did you use for sample data as well?
No. This one is a blank data. Sorry. No, we didn't. We don't need to start. We are going to add data. So we want to show you how to create a database with the sample database. This one, we're going to create it from scratch. I'm going to show you a different way to create data into the database. We have a blank database right now. So if you didn't choose anything and we collect, then we're good. Are you guys behind? Am I going too fast? I know I talk fast.
Yeah, may possible, can you change your Azure theme to white? It's not visible.
A bigger or larger? I mean, font larger.
Yeah.
Is that what
Can
you
you
mean?
do more? Yeah, now it's good.
Perfect.
Unless
Okay.
what
No, that's good.
120,
I'm blind as a bat too, so that's good.
but 25% will be best for.
125 will be better? Okay. That's good.
Yes. Good. Also, can you change your theme to white background? Possible.
White background. Okay. How do I change that? Go back to the
Go to
setting to change
profile.
it?
Yeah.
You want me to choose a theme that way? All right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And I was like, what? I'm telling you, I am not awake this morning for some reason. Don't know why, but okay. Everybody, I know it takes a good couple minutes for everybody to have that created because everyone machine has a different speed. So we should, once it's complete, we need to be in the in that database, which we created called logistics database. Let me know when you're in that database, because I want to show you something new. I want to make sure nobody missed it, because if we missed it, we're going to have a trouble later, which we don't want that trouble. All right. So hang in there, guys. After this one, we'll take a quick break, okay? So hang in there. Can anybody confirm that the database is created and you are in the database overview blade?
Yeah, I'm there.
You're in? Perfect. All right. And you guys can communicate me through the Skype chat also if you don't like to turn on and off your audio. All right. So we're in the logistics SQL database. I want you guys to, again, notice the server name. The server name is always append with database.windows.net. We have elastic pool, no elastic pool, pricing tiers, basic. So in the overview blade, the same type of information. But if you, of course, we not have anything running, but I want you guys to scroll down. If you look at on the compute utilization, so if you're, if you have an actual live database you're running, this would be good to look at it. You can see the compute utilization as a DBA if you're a database administrator, and even if you're an application person, it'll be good for you to look at it to see, okay, how much data my application is using. You can look at it by 1 hour, 24 hours, 7 hours. You can view the maximum compute utilization. You can view minimum. You can view average. So these are pretty cool stuff, right? And then you can also look at, it tells you DTU percentage. So that DTU percentage is way lower than what you set up. Then you overestimated your thing. You need to go and degrade it down so you're not paying for what you don't need. You can also look at these different data encryption. It tells you that we did transparent data encryption, advanced data security, automatic tuning. These are things that we don't have in anything turned on. Geo-replication. These are all the things that you can configure. Dynamic data masking, which is really cool stuff too. Geo-replication. Other sessions we have time, we'll do some of these here. We'll go in and play with some of these databases in here. But so I want you guys to notice that these are things that you wanted to do if if you're if it's a live database. Of course, we're not really running a big database here. So on the very top command bar, you should see we had copy, restore, export, set server firewall. Everybody locate that button. It's on the top command bar. In the top command bar, the command is set server firewall. Let's select that. So when you select a server firewall, again, we are not a network guys. Unless you guys are, I'm not. But if you're not a network admin at your organization, this is something you might need to communicate with them and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. What IP address, what firewall can I set or I can't set? Sometimes you might not be able to set. But notice that here I have a client IP address, 73.104.9.229. You guys should have a different IP address there. Allow access to Azure services is on connection from to all the database. So you will say connection from this IP will provide access to all the databases in that server. So I'm going to select add client IP, and it puts in my client IP address. Okay, we're not doing any of these creating VNet and stuff, all the virtual network stuff, but we will do those in the last session when we're doing network access stuff. Anyway, so everybody able to add the client IP, because that will be important for us to connect. So we need to make sure that we add our client IP. So client IP is the machine that you are using, your desktop IP address that you're using. So we're saying that's our client IP because the server that we're connecting to is in the Azure. It's on the cloud, right? It's on the Azure portal. We created through Azure portal, but it's sitting on the cloud. So we have to tell them that, hey, this is my IP address. When I come in with this IP address, let me into the server. So that's what we're doing. So once you do that, we are going to collect save. Everybody good, right? I'm not hearing anything different, so I am assuming we are good here. So back to the documentation. So we just add the client IP. So, and we had set the firewall, save. Now we are going to connect to the database and add the sample data. So before we go into connect to the database and add sample data, I put an example in here just to make sure you guys see that. So that default group is your resource group that we just created, okay? Resource group. So this is default resource group equal whatever that your resource group, that's what you're going to replace there. And the SQL Server, this is what you're going to replace your SQL Server name. Not sure we had to give the whole thing or not. We'll see. Okay. So what we are going to do that in Azure Cloud Shell. So let's make sure that successfully update your firewall is updated. Perfect. Now we are going to go back to the overview blade. So I'm going to stop the firewall. Make sure that you're looking at the overview blade here. We are going to select the Cloud Shell. So as you guys know by now, Azure, if they say that type something in Azure CLI, we can be in Bash Shell. We just don't need to be in PowerShell. That's the only thing. We need to make sure that we are not in PowerShell. We need to make sure that we are in the Bash Shell. Bash kind of share Azure CLI and Bash. Don't ask me why, but that's how they do it. So make sure that you are going to use, so make sure you replace with your resource group name and the server name. So as you can see, your resource group name up there. If you still have the logistic database overview blade open, I just leave it open. That way I can see what I have in there. Mine is my group -rgmm SQL Server. I'm going to just put main server 123 first without the database.windows.net. I want to see if it recognizes it or not. So let's see if it recognizes it or not. So it does recognize it. Okay. So you only have to put the server name. You don't have to give the whole path. You don't have to put the friendly, qualified domain name. You don't need to put that. You just need to put the server name. So was everybody able to use the default group and change the server name and did the easy configure? All right, I'm hoping that everybody's in. Okay, once we do that, the next command, if you can't connect, let me know, because that would be important for us. That would be deal breaker here. But I assume everybody is in. The next command we're going to do list is just to see what all the databases listed in Azure, which is all the different versions of databases. You should see a whole list of stuff there. What the databases are, what Microsoft SQL databases we have, and that's okay.
Maybe the first command is not working for me.
Okay, which part? The connection not working?
Yeah, the configure, AZ configure.
Yeah, okay. So, all right. So, but did you replace it with? Can you look at my screen? Did you replace it with the right resource group?
Yes.
And the server name, just the server name itself?
Yeah.
And when what error are you getting?
I'm getting the usage error.
Usage error. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're missing something here. But okay, so first of all, are you in a green prompt that has your name at Azure? $? Is that? Are we? You know what I mean by the prompt here? In green, it should say your name add Azure, whatever your login name is, add Azure. Are you in that green prompt? And are you in the green prompt? Okay, you're in the bash shell?
Yeah, the bash shell.
$sign? Okay. Okay, tell me what is your resource group name?
My resource group SG.
Okay, so you didn't put a quote or anything, right? So you just have az configure dash dash default space group equal your name, whatever the resource name, space SQL.
Yes.
Dash server equal, and what's your server name?
Server name is MySQL Server SG.
Okay. Well, it seemed like you had it right. Let's this time let's type it in. Don't copy and paste it. And also when you do group equal my resource group, make sure there's no space between the equal before or after. It shouldn't matter, but just to stay on the same side. Did anybody have a problem connecting?
No, mine was successful, May.
Oh, you guys successful. Okay, good. Thank you. We know the statement works because at least I know I'm in and another person's in, so we know the statements work. We just need to make sure that you are using the resource group and server name. Make sure that we're not. I know I typed in wrong. I can have spelling incorrect all the time, so make sure you're typing incorrect. But it's a usage. I know that doesn't make usage means that you're having a space or somewhere where you're not supposed to. I'm assuming that the syntax somewhere, when a cut and paste can happen.
I may, if I execute that as a SQL DB list.
Yeah, okay, that should give you a bunch of lists. That's the next, another command. I was just waiting for, did you, who said that you're getting an error? I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
This is Kaushik.
Kaushik, okay, are you in now? Or still?
But still that usage error is coming from.
Usage error. Okay.
Okay, now it's working. I removed the spaces, now it's working.
Oh, okay. What did you remove?
I put some space after the group and the SQL Server.
Oh, yeah, you should have the space, yeah, because that's a different parameter, right? Yeah, SQL Server is another parameter, yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, when you do cut and paste, sometimes that, spacing can be a problem. So if you get that, then the next command is we're running is az space SQL space db space list. That just to tell you all the available databases in Azure for you. That's what it's showing. Okay, so there's a huge list. I'm not going to look at that list, but that's what it's showing. So we just want to look it up. What are we available for us? Which we don't really need to know, but it's good to know. But you can also go look up in the portal as well. Now, once we have that, now we just want the database name only. So what we're going to do is we're going to run that command in step 3. So please I know cutting and pasting is an issue, so make sure that we also look at, that's why also I give you the screenshot, so how the command's supposed to read, because sometimes when you cut and paste, you can lose spaces or things like that. So please make sure. Okay, so you should see an output with your database name, logistic, and say logistic is a master database. So we only need, so that you don't need to type in the output. We just need to, when you run it, you should see the output. Your output should have 2 names, logistics and master. If your logistics is your database, if it's not showing master, let me know. It should be master. Okay, if we got that run, then the next thing we're going to ask is to show logistics. So we want to get details about that logistics as the database we created. So we are going to run that command here. And the next command is AZSQL DB show name logistics. So you can do that with any database, different name. It will tell you the details. Okay, what type of database it is, all that good stuff. So especially if a database that somebody created, this is a way for you to look at it. In AZ command, show me that it's going to show something existing. Show me display, display that to my screen. That's what you're telling. Show is a command we use for that. Now we are going to also, you want to set the databases on, see the databases online and can hold around 2 gigabyte of data. So we're running another DB show command. Show command is just to say, show me what the statistics, what's the name of it, what's the detail about it. You're not setting anything. So this is just going to tell you what the maximum size of your database is, the status is online or not, and it's going to tell you that the name, the maximum byte size, and the status. But we can see that on the portal also. We're just trying to show you both ways to make sure that you can do it in the portal as well as in the Azure command line, CLI. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is show a connect string. Show connection string. Okay, so we are, and I'm going to, okay, so show connection string. If you name your database anything other than logistics, you need to replace that name logistics with something else. But you see that is our SQL command equal TCP : your server name, port 1433, and say the database is logistics, and you have a username and password. It's there. So now you see that is how we're getting the connection string through the command line. But we can also get the connection string from up there also in the portal as well. And if you leave the portal window just like me on the top, click that show database connection string, and you can compare that. See that? It's a server, there's a TCP : the server name, initial, catalog. It has more information, but pretty much it's the same thing. It's saying, hey, this is my authentication. This is my connection string if you want to connect to my database. Earlier we connected, remember guys that we connected through the query editor, we connected to that database in the portal. Now we're going to try to connect it through the PowerShell. But we did the same thing. You can still connect it through the portal from here if you like, but we are going to try to connect it through the portal, through the command line shell, if I can talk today. Not PowerShell, command line. Okay, so we have seen that. So this is a very similar connect string, as you can see. It's the same connect string. It does the command. This is not a command. This is just telling what the string is. This is a command. All right? So once we see that, so this is what we just typed it, and now your output's going to look like this, which we see the output. And now we are going to run that SQL command. And this time we are going to, so before we run this statement here in step 2, guys, we need to make sure that you are using the right username and password here. So you need to replace the right username and password. Okay. And also notice that here, there's the Contoso -1 that we don't, ours is not TCP Contoso. What did our comeback? Our comeback is that whatever TCP : mail server, blah, 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 database windows.net, that from the previous command you got, that's what you need to replace with, okay? So this is a little, we need to be careful, a little tricky. So we need to make sure that you're replacing the correct one. So what I do normally in that case, I just copy this statement here. So go to replace that TCP : Contoso -1. You need to take that out and replace it with your correct one. And so go back to the overview. Your database server name should show up right there. So mine is May server 1234. So I need to make sure it is going to say here, May server 1234.database.windows.net. So I'm going to replace, oh, I need to have that TCP there. TCP colon, May server 1234.database.windows.net, comma, 1433, drive logistics. So logistic is fine. That's our file name. -u username is going to be my admin username. Mine is admin May. And password, I don't have any special characters. Like I said, I told you guys to make sure there's no special characters. All right. So we have to replace three things. We're going to replace the server name, TCP colon Contoso -1 to your server name. Replace that. We're also going to replace the username and password. So there's three things that we're replacing in that statement for step 2. So make sure that we do it right. We have it right. Okay. So if we have it right, you should see that I'm in a SQL prompt. It's saying with number 1 and a greater sign. That means I'm in SQL now, which means I am connected to the database. Now I am in the logistic database. Everybody good there? If you can't connect, please let me know. This is where we need to make sure you can connect.
Yes, very good.
You good? Okay. All right. So you were sitting at that prompt, and its prompt is waiting for a SQL command. Say that, hey, you're in the database now. Give a SQL command. So we are going to step 3. So step 3 is going to create a table named drivers. A table driver. Do I have? I don't know why do I have twice, but okay. Create a table driver, and it's say the last name, first name, all of that. All right. Notice that they put Go, but Go is not something you can put. It's going to be in the second line because you have a semicolon at the end of the create table drives. Okay, so now you need to see that is that table we just created, does that table exist or not? Okay, so step 4, we are going to select name from systables. And still we are still in the command line prompt, and they want to do Go, so I keep doing Go. All right, so you can see that, and after you run that step, select statement 4, which is creating a driver, and you select Go and click enter, it should say 1 row affected. Everybody able to see that 1 row affected? So in this one, what I've tried to show you guys is I want to show you guys different way to do this. Okay, why is insert into statement? I don't know why I don't have insert into statement here. Okay. Okay, which one is this one again? Job notepad. All right. That's not that one. That's the target server. I need to go get the insert statement. Hold on, guys. I don't know why I don't have that insert statement. Give me just 1 second. I just need to find out where to download that from. Session 1. Okay, when I'm looking for that, not to waste your guys' time, let's, just so you guys know what I was looking, here is the insert into, but I didn't I didn't do the copy, so we can't see the whole thing. That would be, I think we can figure it out, but I couldn't see the whole thing. So, okay, so that's what I'm trying to find, this statement. I missed one copy. So, all right, why don't we take a break, so we're not, we're going to take a break. We only have 3 or 4 commands to run anyway, so when you guys come back, we'll run it. I'll try to find that insert into statement for you guys. So, it's about 8:37. So, let's come back at 8 to put those statements in also in the Skype chat, so you can get that, you can get those statements from one way or the other, either from the document. I upload the revision version there for you guys, or you can get it from, from the chat if you have access to Skype chat. So I just run my insert statement. So after run that statement, I need to do go. That it will say run rows affected. So make sure you guys got the command. So I upload a new file, SQL command revision 1.0, which should have that insert statement. And you guys notice that, right? Once you've run the statement, just wait at the prompt until you type in go, that it will execute that, and you should see 1 rows affected. So that's where we are at. Everybody able to get the statement and able to download it from the Skype revision file, or you have it in the chat file. So I just run that insert statement. I am going to go select to see. I can see my one record. I just put in 1 record only, so it's not a huge thing. Of course, in real world, you're going to import a table or a CSV file or something like that, right? And then the next thing we're going to do is update. So if you can have access to the files and you're able to run these, go ahead. If you're not, let me know what I can do to get it to you. And we're updating the record. So just trying to show you what you can do. You can do these in the Cloud Shell. And I mean, if you've been doing SQL, you know how to do it in the SQL statement, in the SQL, and that's what we did earlier. The first one we did with using the query editor in the database. It's the same thing. You can delete stuff. We can count from the drivers. It will say how many records you have from drivers. So I don't delete my stuff, but I'll run a count one just to see and run go. Okay, see 1 rows affected. So number count, I only have one record, so number count come back 1. So, all right, was everybody able to run any of those? Lucas Prakish, is it Prakish? Did I pronounce it right? If I don't, my apology. Prakish, were you able to run it? Were you guys able to get those commands from the document or from the chat? Okay, maybe he's not back yet. Can anybody hear me?
I was able to run it just fine as well as in SQL Server as well. So.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. If you can run it one, it should be running both. We run it in the query editor earlier. We just wanted to show you how you can do it. Perfect. And you are Brian?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, just wanted to make sure. So we want to get out of the SQL command. You just need to type in exit, and you're back in the Azure prompt. We are back in the Azure CLI prompt. So that had complete that lab. We are doing good. We already finished 2 labs this morning. Now we are back at, let's talk about the next thing we will create. I'm back to the PowerPoint files. So in the PowerPoint files, we go back to the PowerPoint files. If you want to follow along with me, stay with me on this one here. So we are going to manage a SQL Elastic Pool performance and cost. So we're going to create Elastic Pool. So we have to create the underlayer database. We have to create the server the database is going to resides on. So we're kind of doing all the legwork first. We got all the legwork done now. So now we're going to go in and create things. All right. We are going to create the Elastic Pool and do other stuff. So we talked about the Elastic Pool a couple of times already. So Elastic Pool is pretty much a group of resources. It's a pool. There's a group of resources, and within that group of resources, we are going to assign databases into that resources to share. So you pretty much want to share resources among the databases. Then you wanted to create Elastic Pool, and then you're going to attach the database to the pool and say, okay, now we have 10 databases in that pool, and they are going to share that resources. So some, depends on what particular machine is available, which machine is not available. You're going to do different things. So that's what we're doing in the Elastic Pool. Depends, your bottom line is you are sharing the resources among the databases. So we did the vCore-based purchasing model this morning. We did pick that one, and then we did the DTU-based also, and we talked a little bit about it. So let's look again. DTU-based pricing model means that DTU stands for Database Transaction Unit. It is a unit of measurement for the performance of the service tiers. It's not just one thing. It's not just memory. It's not just disk space. It's a combination of what it takes to run a transaction. So like we just run a SQL statement, we did a select statement, we did a insert, we did an update. All of those are considered transactions. So what does it cost? Means that the cost means we're not talking price cost here. We're talking about the resource cost. What is the resource cost do we have to run each database transaction? That is your DTU. Compute sizes expressed in terms of database transaction for a single database or elastic database transaction unit. It stands for eDTU. So if you have a bunch of databases within an elastic pool, you're going to have to choose your eDTU pricing based on how many databases in the elastic pool, what type of data are in there, how big the databases are, what type of people, what type of transaction they're going to have. Is that going to be a stale data, which means it doesn't move too much, or is going to be hot data or cool data? So you need to look at all of them. So demand exceeds available resources for your tier for any resource. Performance database is throttle. So the model is best for customers who want simple pre-configured resource option available in that 3 tiers. We have basic, standard, and premium. vCore's pricing models is a little different. That should be on the other page. So vCore-based pricing model is more advanced. Also, administrators are more advanced that they know what they're doing, or they've been running the for a while, so they have a better idea what exactly that their database needs, what type of resource you need. So if you're not sure, you're better off sticking with the DTU base that we were doing, static, basic, premium, all that. But if you have a better idea, and you also have you're running also a huge database with need a very high performance, then we recommend you to do vCore based. And there are multiple versions. The latest version of general purpose always going to have have the best and cream of the crop functionality. So that's how you go to decide. But if you you have a lot of stuff that you're not sure what it's going to take for transactions going to take, resources wise, then you're better off doing the DTU. But if you know for sure, we're going to cloud that you wanted to choose more a vCore based pricing model. The vCore based pricing model is based on more workload requirements, and your workload. If you're not sure, you should stick with the other one. A comparison of two pricing model. DTU model is simple. Base model, bundle measures of compute, storage, and I/O resources. Best for customers who want simple pre-configured resource options as far as storage-wise. Now, if you're doing a vCore model, it's an independent scalability, so you can scale per storage. In the DTU, you only have one storage. Okay, if you're doing vCore-based model, you can scale independence for each storage and each I/O sources, who has a value flexibility control and transparency with Azure Hybrid benefit for SQL Server to gain cost savings. So that's when you use we'll use the vCore model. We had created the SQL database in both models. So, and reviewing the cost estimate. So, as we were looking at earlier, you can see the basic model has about $72.02 a month. If you go to premium, from that 72 can spike to $697.50. That is huge spike. So you really have to pay attention on how what you're going to need, and you're not assigning more than you need. So you need to, that's like I was telling you guys earlier also, that to make sure you got to run this for 2-3 months, that you have a good idea that you need to go back and adjust it. After 2-3 months, or even like a first month, if you say, oh, like I was, when we were in the database, remember we showed that DTU chart. If you look at the DTU average is way below than what you assign, then you know that, hey, I'm way over. I don't need that much. I'm not using my resources. But if you're way high, then you say, okay, I need to bump up my resources. So I need to change it to, more DTU, what maximum size of data you can come and increase any of these. Notice that this is the pool setting. We have two tabs here, database tab and per database setting. So this database tab is where you go to add what other database belongs to that pool, elastic pool. And within if you have an option that you're going to have all the servers in the database is evenly, which means that the system's going to decide who needs the most resource and it'll give it to them. And if not, like I was saying earlier, if you have a critical database that you wanted to make it priority, then you can go into per database settings and say no matter what, no matter other systems are busy or not, I want you to allocate this much to this particular database. So we'll go ahead and set those up a little bit. In the next lab, we'll get to do that. But that's what the per database setting is for. If you don't need to worry, if you don't want to set anything up per database setting, that means that all the server, all the databases in that elastic pools they have no higher priority. Everybody is equal. All the database servers are equal. That's what it meant. vCore-based pricing model, again, it's here looking for, saying, for up to 24 vCores, up to 80 virtual cores, save money, save up to 55% with a license. If you already have a SQL Server license, you can save money there. have vCore compare with DTUs. They're a combination. You can look at how many vCores you need, virtual cores you need, data max size you need. So again, the price is also very different. If you look at the business critical, there is over $1,000. So this is all depends on what you need, and you have option to scale down or scale up at any second without bringing the database down, without having any impact to the database. Okay, in this particular one, we are going to go and create a SQL Elastic pool. So let me make sure I have the right files here. So just finish this one and close that. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We are going to use to create a SQL Elastic pool. So we're going to run this one, okay? So make sure everybody are in the create a SQL Elastic pool. All right, so everybody had it. So let's look at what we're going to do here. So, okay, so we're going to create a SQL server, of course, and we are using the Azure command line. Notice it's an Azure CLI. So we are going to set login, admin login. You can keep the same login you want. You've had it earlier if you want. Resource group, you can, for this one, for Elastic Pool, let's create a new resource group. You know, say Elastic Pool. We should say something like that. So, dash RD, so we know that, create that for our Elastic Pool. Server name, we are not going to do random. Fitness server name. We can also, give a server name instead of doing that. Are we doing this in this Azure CLI? Okay, server name, location, and password. Okay, so here in the server name, I would do this, fitness server -mm, and let's just, I wanted to do random because that's going to be hard to location. We can do West US. Of course, password, you guys go to decide whatever password that you use, or you want to use the same one, we can't. So in the Azure command line interface. So let's try to set the, okay, well, I'm going to keep the admin login the same. The thing I created was admin May, yeah, admin May. So we need to go ahead and create a resource group first. I don't think we can create a resource group equal. Not sure, but we'll test it to see if we need I would run this one at a time. I just want to see. Okay. Yeah, so we could go ahead and run it, but let's run it, let's run the statement one at a time. So that way, if there's a problem, we'll know which one. Okay. I don't know why we'll do that. So make sure that you choose the admin login name. What's the resource group? Okay, so I think I need to create the resource group first, though. Okay. So we need to create the resource group first. So I'm going back on the portal. Well, let's go into the resource group. And let's create add the resource group. We are in the resource group on the portal. We are in the resource group. The resource group blank, we're going to select add, and that's where you're going to create your resource group here. So I know you can create the command created in the PowerShell, I'm sure. I just didn't want to waste our time there. I am going to go with West US, right? So everybody got that, right? We created a resource group in the portal. Just a resource group, just choose the resource group region. As long as you don't choose East US, I'm good. Okay. Here's a resource group. All right. And now when I do that, they should see it because I have a resource group called elasticpool.org. Why is it saying that? Yep, I have a resource group. I don't know why I can't run that command. Resource group. Resource underscore group. Yeah, okay, without. Yeah, I tried to run it without it. It wouldn't let me run it without it. I already have a resource group created, so maybe I don't need to do this. All right, let's see if I don't need to add that. Okay, yeah, it's not liking that. Resource group. Okay. Is that right to this? Okay, let's assume that I don't need to worry about that. Are you guys having the same problem? Cannot run those, or am I the only one having a problem?
I had no problems running them.
Okay, I don't know why am I having a problem.
Yeah, I think you're giving double quotes. You need to have those double quotes removed.
I did remove it. It still did me earlier.
Can you try for location without the double quotes?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to try, but hold on. I tried. But I run this morning. I don't know why. See, it said bash command not fine. Not location.
Space. Right.
We are in
Can
the
you remove
CL.
the space as well after location?
Um,
Location equal to, there is a space after that.
that I don't think that should matter. But okay. I normally don't put a space though. So it's still saying not fine. I had something wrong with my bash shell. Okay, I'm just starting it, so I'm just going to restart the shell. For some reason, I didn't like my shell. You can create the resource group in that shell as well, right? You didn't have that problem. You guys don't have that problem. Okay, I'm just going to go to the next statement and go create these. And server name resource group. Instead of doing it in parameters, you can just do it, type that in. Okay, let's see what happens. I'm just going to try to go to the sources to see if I can do it from there. Because I have to run individually. Okay. All right, I'm just going to run this instead of that. All right. So the next one we're running is creating the SQL Server. So notice that the dash means that it is, you can, it is a continuation of the line, is what we're saying. So Azure SQL Server create, dash. So instead of the server name, because for some reason mine's not taking it, I'm just going to type in my server name there. And you just need to replace it. You guys don't need to do this, but I do. A SQL Server. But you can go in and type in the, change it that way there too if you have any problem. And resource group. So admin user. I am. I'm going to use the same user I used before. Admin me. And the password. Okay, let's see if I can run that. So we are creating the SQL Server. And after we create the SQL Server, I didn't create the server name, that's fine. We're going to add a database name to that server. So that's the next statement we're running is adding so using the same server name and you're adding a database name there, which is Fitness Vancouver DB. And then we are going to name Fitness Paris DB. So we're going to add two database. Then we're going to create Elastic Pool in the portal, which we can create it here as well. But so once that statement run, and we have that server, that resource group is in that. So go back to, I'm in my resource group, so I can see my servers created. Now we're going to run the to statement. After that is to create the database. We are creating two databases. We are creating a Fitness Vancouver and Fitness Paris. So we had to run that statement twice. So I'm going to go into my document and change it in here. So we create the server, and now we're going to create the database. All right. Okay, my resource group needs to be all right. So DB create resource group, my server, resource group. Okay, server, MySQL server. That is the database name. Creating a database in that server, in that resource group. All right, we are creating, I don't know, you guys are past me already by now, is the, that's again, it's not a mine, it is Elastic Pool. Can you take the M out of that? That should be running okay now. Okay, Fitness Vancouver DB. Then we are running the Paris DB. So should be identically the same except the fitness name. Okay, so we should have, at least you guys should have one database by now, or you should have both databases. Wait for me for a second. I will get there. So once we create both databases, now we can go create the Elastic pools. Mine's still running, so give it a few seconds to run the Vancouver database. Then we run the Paris database. We are good on one. Now go to create the Fitness RDP, Fitness Paris database. So far, so good. Everybody creating both database and it's going. It's going. Not done yet, but it's still going. I don't know what's the weather over there, but it's sunshine, Florida. The sun is out today. For a change, lately it's been kind of overcast. It's 80 degree here. All right, I have both of my database created, and I can refresh it to see all my database and my server under my portal. So now we are going to we are at the Create Elastic Database Pool session now. So we are in the Create a SQL Elastic Pool. We are back in the Azure portal. In the Azure portal, of course, we're always going to that Create a Resource. You guys know this by now. We need to go into Create a Resource. And in the Create a Resource window, we are in the New Blade. We are going to we're going to type in SQL Elastic Database Pool, and we are in the SQL Elastic Data Pool window, say Create. Everybody okay, right? You guys are the same as me? You're ready to go to create the Elastic Database Pool, right? Can anybody confirm?
Yeah, I'm able.
Ooh. Very good. We are going to select Create. All right. Okay, so we are going to name this Fitness SQL Pool with your initial. Okay, the prescription is pretty much the same. Resource group is already there. Notice that the server came in already for us. We have using the same server. Okay, configure pool. Okay, so this is where we need to go in. So what is your create it first? Okay, we'll create it first then. We could have got it done in here anyway, but okay, so we got the name, we choose the same resource group, we have our server in, we are leaving the configure pool, we'll come back and configure it later, so that's the next thing we're going to do, so select create here. All right, let that grow. So we're all creating the elastic pool now, right? That's going to create a couple of stuff, so it takes a couple of minutes though. All right, mine is done. So I can go to the resource, so I can find my SQL Elastic Pool. You can also go, if you didn't open it from what is completed, you can go into also all resources, and you should see your Elastic Pool. So if you don't open it from the notification bell button, you can go into all resources and you should find your SQL Elastic Pool. So we are in the SQL Elastic Pool. Everybody, we're there. From that screen, from the Elastic Pool, now we are going to go into configure. which is when well, before we go into that, let's look at the overview there. So notice that we have the resource group name, we have status saying ready, location is West US, we have subscription, ID, tags, all that, as well as the server name there. We have resource configuration pricing. Elastic databases, we don't have anything yet. Database settings, because we haven't set anything yet. So, okay. So from there, in the middle section, in the configuration section, we're going to select configure. Okay, so when we select configure, this is a little bit too low for me. I need to make it a little bigger. Okay, so let's pull to this side. So we are in the configure button. So notice that last time we went in, we were in the pool settings. We set the basic pool, all that stuff. We haven't been to the database tab. And earlier I said there's 2 other tabs that we need to configure. So this time we are going to go into the database tab. Notice that in the database tab we have no databases. Database ready, and say database to, the pool is ready, but we have no database. So we are going to select add database. So we are going to select the database for both location. Okay, and we're going to click apply. So we have Vancouver DB, and we have, and if you look at it, we can see you have both database name. We only have 2 databases here anyway, in this case, and we are going to select save. So before this is just doing other stuff to just review, but it's still adding databases. So let's wait till finish adding, and then we can look at other parameters in this one. We've got one more lab to do. So it is creating, adding the 2 databases to our pool, right, guys? Everybody at that stage? So. Okay, so we had successfully add 2 to it, and we'll come back and look at this per database settings in a second here. But okay, so we have 2 estimate cost per setting, go to database. We have 2 database here. Make sure that you see both of your database, you save. You have to save that 2 databases once it's created. That we went into configure. It's still the configure section. I go into the database section and click save. That should take a couple seconds. How are we doing, guys? We're doing good. You're learning a lot of stuff, and I'm not sure exactly, depends on what you do, what your job role in here in this, but like I always said, that knowing more is not going to hurt you, knowing less will hurt you. And especially when it comes to database, there's no way, it doesn't matter, either you're an application person, you're an administrator, you're architecture, architect doesn't matter. You are going to deal with data. So the more you understand the data, the more you know about the data, it's going to be, it's going to play a critical role that what you do within the Azure. That's why we dedicate 4 sessions for this. This is our first session. There's a lot more we need to know in the, about SQL. All right, so once we're back in the portal, so let's look at a couple stuff in the portal. So we can do, we'll go back and we're going to come back into this in a second and go back into the per database settings and all that. But wanted to go back to the overview here. Notice that in the overview, we can create a job, we can manage jobs, we can create database. We're going to create jobs and stuff. That's the next session we're going to do. But in now we are in the pool, Elastic Pool. Notice that the status is still ready. Elastic Database now, it tells that we have 2 databases because we do have 2 databases. Again, if you didn't catch it earlier, I was saying the utilization, notice that, what does it say? Earlier it was 0. Now my DTU percentage is, say, 0.19%. So it gives you, that is going to change depends on what we're doing. It's going to go up and down if you add database and stuff like that. But this is, in a real world, this is a good place to look at it. As you can see also, you can look at 1 hour, 24 hours, or 7 days. We just open it so we don't have the other options. Not going to say data in it. But also if you look at the max, you can view maximum, minimum, and average. So these are a lot of cool stuff that, tools are right there for us. And if you start having data storage, it's going to tell you what Elastic Pool data storage is. We have maximum size is 100 gigabyte. We have no data in there yet. So, okay. There's a lot of good things that we can do within here. So especially, for the Elastic Pool and stuff, we can create a database, we can create jobs. So we can do all this fun stuff here. And in the administration sections also, there are a couple of things I wanted to point out. You can export template and you can import template for, in here you can do that, as well as you can lock. So the resource has no locks, but you can add. So if you're working on, one database you want to make sure that nobody can access to, you can lock it so no one can access to that particular database within your Elastic Pool. So let's say there is some problem we're running into that particular server. We wanted to lock it so nobody can access to it. You can look at monitoring stuff there. We have database resource utilization. It can tell you what utilization for each one. We don't have a lot of data in there, so it doesn't make sense there. You can look at matrix, and you can go different sizes of, detail. We'll do the monitoring session, so we'll go to more detail on that. But these are things that you can look at. You can set up diagnostic settings. Diagnostic settings additional cost, so I don't have it, so I had to pay if I add that to it. But you can see there's a lot of things that we can do within the Elastic Pool. So that's what we just did. We just created Elastic Pool. We kind of started in the Azure Cloud Shell, and we created the pool itself in the portal. So before we go to the next one, so let's go back and look at our PowerPoint slides. If everybody had a chance to create the Elastic Database Pool, SQL Elastic Pool, right? Everybody had a chance to create it. It'd be good to at least have that exposure. So the next thing that also we're going to talk about, we need to do one more lab. Okay, manage SQL Elastic Pools. Okay, let's do this one first before we go to the secure DB. Okay, so we are still stay in the pool where you are already. Stay in the pool. We are going to configure the settings. I'm not worried so much about that. We want to adjust per database settings, which we haven't done. So let's go back into per database settings tab, okay? To the settings, we go into configure. We are still in the Elastic Pool, so if you're not, go back into your SQL Elastic Pool, whatever you name it. We name it Fitness SQL Pool, something, whatever you name that. Now go back to that SQL Elastic Pool. In that, you go to select configure again. That's where we were earlier in that tab. We we went and add the databases, make sure that databases is still there. Okay, and this time we are going to go into per database settings. So, okay, in the per database settings, we don't have anything for per database settings in there. So we're saying, do you want to have a set amount of per database setting? We can change the max and minimum in per database setting. Depends on what you choose. Say per database settings, say, well, when I say per database settings here, that's you're telling the system that, hey, this is what minimum I want to have in the database, no matter what. Don't, if that's my minimum, don't give out my minimum to another database. So that's what you're doing in the per database setting, is that no matter what, anytime I want to make sure I have that much in my database. So you say, don't, so don't drain all my resources. I want to have this much reserved for my database. That's what you're doing in there. Okay? So the next thing we're going to do, and I don't know if you guys are looking at it, but I'm sorry, maybe if I went through without telling you, but we are doing these managed SQL Elastic Pool. That's what we're just looking at it. That's what we're just going through. So we're just going to, adjust it per database settings. That's what we just did. Now we're going to go in and create a database in the pool. So as you can see, we're showing you so many different ways. That's one thing that's scary, is there's so many different ways to do the same thing. So I always tell my students that once you pick up a particular way that you like to do, but you need to keep in mind that how Microsoft likes to do things. So for the, if you're ever going to take this, certification test, they really need to make sure, you need to make sure how Microsoft wants you to do it in the test. All right. So I did some changes on my per database settings, so I went and saved it. So after the save is complete, I go back to the overview blade. In the overview blade, we are going to select that create database. And okay, so we're going to create it called Fitness London DB. So Fitness London DB is what we're going to create. Select a source is going to be a blank database. Server, we're going to create it in the same server. We are already in Elastic Pools. We're going to come back and add that. We already told what Elastic Pool it is. Correlation. So we put our database name. Select a source. The source is going to be a blank database. We're going to select a blank database. And server, we're going to use the same server we have all our stuff in today. Elastic Pool is already selected for you. It tells you what Elastic Pool it is. SQL, the server Elastic Pool you can't change, and correlation. Okay, then we are going to select create. Click OK. This one's not create. Click OK. And let's see. It's going to create. Now today we had created SQL database in 3 ways. We created a SQL database from the create a resource and went in and say Azure SQL database. We created that way. We also create the SQL database in the Azure command line in ALI, as well as within the portal from a different location within the pool. We also show you how to create the database. So we create the database in 3 different ways today. Okay? So in this case, I want to go back into the pool. So first I'll go back into my resource group. In my resource group, I want to go in my SQL pool and go into configure and go into databases. Notice that because we created the database within the pool, the database showed up right away. We don't have to add it. You with me on that? Everybody so far so good? Okay. Hope everybody had a chance to create it and hope everybody had the chance to see it, right? So we are happy so far, and we are going to move to secure Azure SQL database. So let's go back to look at the PowerPoint slides. Okay, so Azure SQL DB say data security is critical, especially these days. You never know who has access to your machine, so it's very important to make sure who have access to your sensitive data, all that stuff. So we need to make sure data is critical. So we need to make sure that customers' privacy and your organization reputation lies on your securing your data, closed due to financial damage or, these days you never know with all kinds of situations that we have. Personal details, again, possibly causing financial harm. So you need to make sure that you are securing your Azure SQL DB. So we're talking about how important it is to make sure that you secure your data. And you know as well as I do, data is the most important thing in your organization, right? So next thing here we're going to do talking about restricting the network access. So we wanted to make sure that not everybody have access to my database. Because database is our customer data, we need to make sure that we protect our customer database, right? We have, and the reason is a lot of time we have sensitive data that we need to protect, right? And because the data is also going over the network, going over the internet, so we need to make sure that we have some restrictions, some business rules apply to our network access, that who we give it to, what they can see, how they can see it, all that good stuff. So we need to restrict network access. So here to restrict network access to have more firewall rules is setting up additional firewall rules for that. So we have server level firewall rules. We have database level firewall rules. So server level, so think of it also like, even though these are virtual, think of it server level is a physical machine. So somebody could get to a physical machine, but we can also set up at the database level that even though they could get into that virtual machine, get into your desktop or virtual machine, they cannot access your database. So you have to protect a server level firewall rule and database level firewall rule. So think of it as like your home. You need, for my house, I have a gate for the, in the property there's a gate, and then I have a two door in before they can get inside the house. So it's total I have 3 doors. So that's the same thing. The more doors that you have, the higher security you'll have. Right? So that's what they're doing. So we have a server level, even though, let's say, for the worst scenario, somebody got into the server, but they cannot get into your database. That's our goal. So we can set up clients to access your SQL Server. So we can also set up allow access to Azure Services rule. That's going to allow user to connect to Azure SQL database. And this site allows communications from all Azure public IP addresses. So that because we are setting up platform as a service, such as Azure App Service, Azure Container Service, anything that you created in the portal, and want to have access to that database because the data is stored in the back end no matter what we do, right? And the app, or the data doesn't store within the app. The data is stored in the back end into the database. So if you can be configured through on-off option, and if you say 0000 by IP rule and start an NIP address, which means you're allowing everybody. But if you're in a protection mode, I'm sure you guys not going to give 100% everybody can access to it. So it's a little bit easier to explain in the public image here. So here's your internet out here, but before when the internet comes in, what we should see really here is your gateway. You should have a gateway there that's going to say, okay, is this a good or a bad, request comes in, and then it will the SQL services depends on what SQL database you're connecting to. If you're within the Azure, we have a public IP and private IP. We talked about that at some point. And we'll talk more about the subnetting, the VNet, all of that in the networking session. And so all these Azure different services are connecting to the SQL service in the back end to the SQL database. And the VM itself, the subnet VNet, they're using public IP to connect to the SQL server. And a lot of times why do we have to connect to the SQL server? We're already in the Azure portal. Yes, you are in the Azure portal already, but to be able to get into the SQL Server is an app as well as a database, right? It's an a type of application. It has its own username and password. It's going to authenticate you because you have access to the VM. Doesn't mean that you're going to have access to the SQL service. So you have to make sure that you have. But so there's a couple ways that you can set your firewall rules to say, okay, only these particular IP addresses, this range, within that range only, I'm going to allow to connect to SQL services, MySQL database. Also in the Azure services, you can pick and choose what services you're going to allow only to connect to, to have access to your SQL database. Okay, that's what we're talking here. Server firewall rules continue to. Rules used when have application running on a platform as a service. Azure Logic Apps, Azure Functions. We create these. We've done these before. They need to access to Azure SQL database because you got to remember those apps are what? These are a separate object. Azure Logic App is a separate object. Azure Functions is a separate object. Azure SQL Database is an object. They all were housed in the Azure portal. However, they are separate objects. In order to connect to each other, you have to access to that. You have to connect to that object. Many of these servers don't have static IP, so the rulers need to ensure that are able to connect to the database, but the people who's not supposed to are not supposed to get into my database. Of course, it's a lot easier if you have a static IP. Your IP address doesn't change. We can say, okay, all the clients have IP address from this range to this range that can access my database. But it's not that easy because we will have some people are not in your organization or they are not having a public IP address, but you do need to give them access to the SQL Server. That's when virtual network comes in. So not only that, like in a regular environment on premises, we have a network, but here also physical network, but to communicate each object, within the Azure portal to the VM connecting to the Azure Web App or Azure Web App, Azure Function connecting to SQL Data. Each of these objects, in order to connect to each other, we also have to have a network inside the cloud, inside the Azure portal. That's why we call it virtual network rules. So we create these virtual network rules to explicitly allow connection from a particular subnet, or tell that, okay, these servers are able, you can connect to this server. So pretty much like what we're creating on-premises network, that's what you're setting up here, setting up in the in Azure to communicate to each object to communicate to each other. So it is really if they're connecting each other using a virtual network rules also, that's not getting, you're not exposing your public IP address on the internet. That's what you don't want to do, because you don't want somebody to piggyback into the database with you, and there's all kinds of hackers out there. So you can do that as well. But so if we're doing that here, then we're creating a virtual network service endpoint. So the users are connecting to that endpoint, and the endpoint is what is going to connect to the SQL Server database. So also you wanted to make sure that users do not have direct access to the SQL database. The more you can have, you wanted to make sure you go through something before it gets to your SQL database. So they don't have direct connection, direct access to SQL servers. They cannot delete it either. You'll be surprised how many people that in my career that they had deleted their entire database. And it was gone with the wind. So to restore that whole thing, it's a time consuming. But anyway, so we also set up virtual network like we have physical network in on premises, and that's what we're doing here. Virtual network also allows you to decide who you wanted to create, who can get in, who cannot get into your database. So virtual network rules are used when you have Azure VM. They need to access your database. For server level rules, all of the above can be created and manipulated through the portal, PowerShell, CLI, and through Transact SQL. All right, database level firewall rules. The database level individual database on the logical server. Remember, we can have many databases on the same server. So you need to be, they have access to the server, but they don't have access to every database on the server. You can say, okay, we have access to data server is one level. The next level is that you have to have access to a specific database, and that specific database is going to be routed by only IP address rule. So you have to configure the IP address rule to make sure that that particular client can connect to that database server and it is on the cloud. So database level is using public IP. So the benefit of having a database level rules that portability, when replicating a database to another server, the database level rules will be replicated. So they are stored in the database itself. So if you have a server level, if you back up the database, if the server crash or something happen, you will not have your server level rules not going to be saved, because they'll go, if you lose your server, you're going to lose that. But the downside of having that a extra level rule is that you can only use IP address rule, because it does not understand. For now, it might have other options coming in the future. May limit the flexibility you have. It can increase administrative overhead because you are assigning a specific IP address to an application or to a user for every single business rules. And you can also use a database level IP address, the server level. Then we have database level IP address. Individual database on a logical server, all of them has a static IP or your app server VM. So to create a database level rules, you need to run a T-SQL command. Now T-SQL stands for Transact SQL, if anybody new with SQL. At Microsoft, so the reason that we come up with T-SQL is Microsoft SQL. As there are other SQLs out there. We have IBM has SQL. There is MySQL. They have Oracle has SQL, PL SQL. So there's already so many different types of SQL. And believe it or not, some of those, all of them, even though they're all SQL, depends on what the vendor application you're in for the SQL, the commands can vary a little bit. So when we say T-SQL, we're saying that is Microsoft SQL. We're using Microsoft SQL, not other type of SQL. So to create a database level IP rules, you're going to run some Transact SQL commands. You'll create a database rule using the following convention. Then you pass it in the rule name. You're going to start IP address and ending IP address. Start and end IP do the same. You can do that with limited access to a single IP. And we can expand the range. So normally, in the beginning, when you're testing phase, I would normally only have one, which is my IP address only. But of course, before you put in production, you're going to give a range of people that, depends on what IP addresses that your organization purchased, and within that range, what departments that you're allowing. So you're going to have that range, that IP address. Okay, so the next one is secure Azure SQL database. However, let's not do the secure Azure SQL database today. Let's do it Wednesday, because I'm concerned if it's go over 30 minutes, I can't do that. So let's go back and talk about everything that we did today. Let's do the overview instead, if you guys don't mind. So let's go back. We did a lot today, though, so we got to go back and make sure that we know what we did today. So go back and look at what we did. All right. we talked about, that's the wrong slide, and my apology, I need to take that off. So we talk about Azure SQL Database. We are going to create Azure SQL Database, which provide platform as a service. So platform as a service to manage all kinds of data. But notice that when we create, we put, so one thing I want you guys to understand, when I say SQL Server, the server is different from the database, right? Within each server, you can have multiple databases. And server is just a logical level, because when we create the server, you didn't tell them what operating system you wanted in on that machine, what operating system is supposed to be. You didn't say any of those. We don't have to say that because it isn't logical, because it's logical, you don't. And server is not, even though it's a server, it's not sitting on a separate machine. It's just a logical area. It's just a container. And we're saying that all the different databases we have, we're going to put it in that container. And you can have more than one container as well within your, you can have many containers. And we're talking about what the different procedures to run that you have: create, read, update, and delete. That's the same thing that we have in SQL. We talk about host the SQL Server on premises, Azure SQL Database in cloud. That's what we did. We went in and create Azure SQL Database in two ways. We created from the portal as well as we created from the Cloud Shell. We did that. We created from both. And so Azure SQL Database is not anything different. It's not different from what we're putting VM and put the SQL database. The only thing is that Azure SQL database, we are not defining what operating system that SQL database needs to be running on. If we try to put it on a VM, we have to define what operating system that VM is going to run before we can put a SQL Server database on it. Okay, so we did both ways. We did it from the portal as well as we did it from the command line. And we talked about the database has several pricing options, and you really need to decide the performance versus cost. Of course, the higher performance you want, the more you're going to pay, but is that worth it? Because every time you invest on something, is always you have to look for ROI, which is return on investment. If your return on investment is not worth it, then you don't need to with the higher performance. So that's the thing you have to look at, the scale. And we talked about that. We have in Azure, everything is scalable. You can scale it in a couple of seconds. Just click a couple buttons. We can say, hey, give me more memory, give me more hard drive, which back in old days, I don't know how young you guys are, but back in old days, having to have a server built is a big ordeal thing. It takes us a month to build the server. Now we can build it a couple of clicks. How cool is that, right? So I love Azure Portal because when all these years that I'm doing and have been in this field, I'm like, well, this is the easiest way to have a server, because back in old days, you had to beg your boss to give you a server, your budget for the server, and then you have to beg IT to install it because they won't let you install it. You have to have an operating system, and they won't let you install operating system. You can install SQL if you want, but you have to have operating system on it first. So you have to beg IT to do that, and if your application, is growing too fast and you need more memory or more disk space, then you got to back them again. And to install it, it's an ordeal thing. You have to make sure that, because you have to bring the system down. You got to make sure that it's a good time that you can bring your database down before you can upgrade. So we don't have any of those problems anymore. So you don't know how lucky you guys are. And you can click on a couple of buttons and we can scale up and down. Then security, like I said, security also, Azure SQL Database comes with a firewall itself. So, hey, even though you may be in my server, which has many databases in that server container, but in order to get into Pacific database, you have a firewall. So you have to have the firewall. You need to get approved for the firewall. So we're having additional gate at the SQL database. Because you're in the server doesn't mean you can access your database. So we have two gates. We have a gate at the server. Once you pass the server gate, then go goes into a specific database, and then you have additional layer there that you have to meet the criteria. You have to be authenticated there to be able to get into the database. So we will do the security when we come back on Wednesday. Create your Azure SQL database. We had create a Azure SQL database. We created it 2 ways. We created multiple databases though. Remember, we created the database from the menu bar from the Azure portal, as well as we created from the command line, as well as we went into the Elastic pool that we created, and from the Elastic pool also we created a database. So you can see there are so many different ways that we can create the database. And we haven't shown you even all the different ways you can do. And this is what we've been talking about, is one server with many databases. Like I said, server is a container. It's a virtual container. You can have many databases on there. But you wanted to, don't overload it either. You wanted to make sure if you're putting a lot of database into one server, make sure that your server it has a high capacity to handle it, because you don't want it to bog down the other databases, because you have too many databases in there. Performance, we talked about the DTUs and vCore. So if you're having a standard, very simple configuration, you're not sure how much your application is going to need or your database is going to need your application need to connect to the database and all that. We would start with the DTU. Once you get more understanding of how the database is running, what is causing you, all that, then you might change it to vCore. But vCore is only if you're running heavily. If you need to run a huge thing and you wanted to, a very complex type of database, then you will set it up a vCore. So we had created the SQL Elastic pool. We created the Elastic pool, and what's Elastic pool? Elastic pool is sharing resources among the databases. We had created the Elastic pool. We had assigned the databases into the Elastic pool. So we done that. Correlation, talk about that. What is correlation is for different language. We're talking about case insensitive. We're talking about accent sensitive, all that. And we also went in and create Azure SQL database. We had created the SQL database many ways. We created from the portal. You can create it from Azure command line, and as well as we can create it from the Elastic pool as well. Set the firewall. We set the firewall to make sure that it knows when a client comes in, that is this client has authentication. We'll talk about different CRUD operations. That's more command line stuff. And what is Azure Cloud Shell? It's a browser-based shell experience. So Cloud Shell, we always tell PowerShell is like a glorified version of DOS, right? A glorified version of command line. Like DOS, and Azure Cloud Shell is the same thing. Azure Cloud Shell is a PowerShell for Azure. So that's what it is. And how to get information out of your server. We did that depending on what you need to show as a FQDN, which is server name.database.windows.net. And connect to the database. We had connected to the database. We had connected to the database from the portal. We went into connect to our database. From the Azure portal, we went into select that query explore, and it pop up and asks us username password. So if you don't have that authorization, you cannot get it. So we did that way. Also, we had connected using the connect string from the Azure command line as well. And so we created a single database. We created a Elastic database pool. Elastic pool is also an object that anything you created in Azure is an object. And Elastic pool also is just like SQL Server. It is a software as a service. And we created the fitness company, to make sure that how quickly each client will grow, we don't know that. So because we don't know the future, we need to make sure that you are using advantage of having that scale up and scale down. Traditionally, SAS provides would either need to over-provision, that they have capacity for peak demand, or add costs or under provision. But here, we don't have to worry about under provisioning or over provision because we can change that in a couple minutes. But back in old days, that's what our problem is, that how do we make sure that, our application will run efficiently, and if we grow, what we're going to do, right? So that's kind of thing. We don't have those problems. We talked about what is the SQL Elastic Pool is a resource allocation service to scale and manage the performance. SQL Elastic Pool is what resources for our database, and you can add as many databases as you can, but depends on how many databases you add in. Your Elastic database pool should be able to handle, it should have enough resources to be able to handle large amount of databases if you have a lot of databases. How many databases add to a pool? You can say up to, in the performance tier, you can go up to 100 to 500 databases to a single pool, which is pretty cool too. Create an elastic pool, that's what we did. We went in and create a elastic pool, and we had add a databases to that elastic pool, and we planned our Azure SQL database. Then we went and create those, and then we came back and looked at the performance and cost to manage the SQL Elastic Pool. That's what we did last lab we did. Can help so it's important to manage the Elastic Pool performance cost. We don't want to get hit by, at the end of the month, you got a big bill from Microsoft. You don't want that. You wanted to make sure that you're managing it day to day to make sure that you don't have something running that's not supposed to be running. So for Elastic Pool, we need to understand how SQL Server performance is measured and priced using DTU or vCore pays. Based on that SQL Server, we're going to decide how SQL Server Elastic Pool is going to be able to run. Is that a DTU base? DTU base means that we're using basic, standard, and premium. If we're using vCore base, it has two versions of general purpose, and you can run serverless. And we look at the charts. DTU is running on a same one storage. If you're using vCore, it can be running on spread at different storages. We look at the cost estimate, and I told you about the starting and ending price, and to make sure that when you're adding things, what it's costing, you got to pay attention to those. And vCore based pricing model. We look at the different size of vCore, different data max size. That's going to go your price up and down. Depends on what type of pricing model, how many vCores you need, and how many data max sizes you need. And we create the SQL Elastic Pool. And we'll come back and do the secure Azure SQL DB the next session. We don't have enough time left to do. Security is a critical when you're protecting customer privacy, your organization reputation. Of course, everybody knows that security data is a big ordeal thing, and especially in today's world, because we have not just structured data, we have disparate data that coming from like Twitter's, Skype chats, Facebook, all of them. So all of those, all of them and above, right? So we need to make sure how do we secure those type of data comes into Azure SQL DB as well. We are also going to restrict network access. So we're going to allow only, not only so-and-so can have, because you have access to the server doesn't mean you have access to the database. Remember that too. But even going to the server level, we can restrict network access, and we're going to create a VNet and say, only so-and-so users can come into. If you're not, you can't come into mine unless you are authenticated in that particular network. A lot of stuff, and there are, again, we're talking about the firewall rules. We have server level firewall rules and database level firewall rules. Server level allow access to Azure servers only, or IP addresses rules. You can create a specific IP address range from this to this. You allow or you don't allow, you can set that. You can also set up a rules for a specific virtual network, the VN. Also, you can say for database level, firewall rule, we only have one level. Database firewall rule, you can only set up by IP address. Server level wire firewall rules, we're talking if you set up your IP to from 000 and on, which means that you are allowing everybody. So you got to be careful that who you're allowing, and also show you that there's that lock option there on the configuration section of the portal. If you do the lock, nobody have access to that server or access to that particular database. And sometimes we do that, especially if we're trying to figure out what the data is doing. So we're talking about here, so in this, if you have a server firewall rule that, coming into a public IP to the SQL servers, are these apps. These are Azure apps that coming in, functions, web app, all of those coming to connect to the database. Firewall, so we talked about that database can only use IP address, and we wanted to, there's not everybody use static IP, because some organizations are using DHCP, but we recommend to use IP only. Virtual network rules is explicitly going to allow which subnet into the Azure portal, which not. So within the virtual network, you're going to create multiple subnets, and subnets going to tell pretty much the subnets can divide by department, sort of kind of thing. So for that department, that's a subnet, and everybody going from that subnet going to access to this particular database, because they all work in the same department. We assume that they're all going to connect to the same server. So that type of stuff. As we're setting up the virtual network rules, and we will go in and create those next time we do this lab. Virtual network has a endpoint. So you have an endpoint going from this to the server. That's your endpoint. And we have, we're talking about a little bit about Transact SQL and database level firewall rules. Database levels are IP address rules only. We talked about that. Database level firewall rule. And here notice that we're not letting app to come in. We're only letting it can have to come in through a public IP only. The benefits of database rules, you're giving more protection to your database. Use a database level IP address rules. You can, again, it is using all the SQL commands. You can block the IP address that you don't want them to come in. You can approve the IP addresses that you allow. So when you come back, we will do the secure Azure SQL database. We guys did pretty good today. We didn't have much hiccup at all compared to last time. So we come back, on Wednesday, we'll do the secure Azure SQL database, and then we're going into the Elastic pool that we created already, or we'll create a new one in that Elastic pool. We are going to create jobs in that Elastic pool. So those are all the things that we will do on Wednesday. I know you guys can't wait for the next session, but I'm sorry that I'm not going to see you guys till Wednesday, so don't be missing me tomorrow. All right, that's the best. That's all I have to say. So if you guys wanted to hang around and continue working on whatever you're working in the portal, you can. If you have any questions, I'm here. But if you don't have any questions, all that, guys have a good day, and I will see you on Wednesday.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, you're welcome. You guys do good?
Yeah, very good.
Perfect. Anybody need me? I'm here. And even if I'm muted, I can still hear you. So if you need me, just holler at me.